We're the Dangerous Divas, and this is our TED Talk on the plague.
Bucket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
The Black Plague directly affected the Catholic Church. Infected rats made their way from Asia to Europe on Italian ships, trading goods across the Mediterranean Sea. Over the next 7 years, the Black Death wiped out over 1/3 of Europe's population. Yersinia pestis is the bacteria that rodents and fleas carried throughout Europe, infecting millions of people that they came in contact with.
It's the plague, gonna kill you in a few days. A pandemic so severe, Black Death caused such horror and fear. And there ain't no cure for that, girl. You'll be dead in no time flat, girl. You get acronecrosis from the Yersinia pestis, and it makes your tongue a black, girl. Gonna bury you out and back, girl.
The bubonic plague was transmitted through fleas and rodent bites. It was rarely spread from human to human. The symptoms include fever, headache, chills, weakness, painful or swollen lymph nodes called buboes. The mortality rate was 50 to 90% if left untreated. The septicemic plague was transmitted through flea and rodent bites or from handling an infected animal. The symptoms include fever, chills, weakness, abdominal pain, shock, internal bleeding, and the skin and other tissues may turn black and die. This is common for the fingers, toes, and the nose. The pneumonic plague was most deadly transmitted through infectious droplets from a person or animal. It can develop from other forms if they are not treated. The symptoms include fever, headache, weakness, rapidly developing pneumonia, shortness of breath, chest pain, cough, and bloody mucus. The treatment is always antibiotics. When people got sick, they turned to the church only to be turned away. Priests weren't giving any answers, so a lot of people were turning away from God. Because the plague was believed to be a punishment from God, some people lost their faith. Others stuck by God and asked for forgiveness for their sins because the afterlife was considered much more important than life on earth itself. Others turned away from God and practiced self-mortification, and this became the flagellant movement.
Of Avesbury. Each wore a hood, painted with a red cross front and back, and carried a whip with 3 thongs. Each thong had a knot in it with something sharp, like a needle, stuck through the middle. As they walked, they sang a Christian litany, and one after the other, they struck themselves with these whips on their naked and bloody bodies.
Contemporary observers talk about flagellants beating themselves and the blood spattering the walls of the surrounding buildings.
The flagellants were religious zealots of the Middle Ages in Europe who demonstrated their religious fervor and sought atonement for their sins by vigorously whipping themselves in public displays of penance. This approach to achieving redemption was most popular during times of crisis. Prolonged plague, hunger, drought, and other natural maladies would motivate thousands to resort to this extreme method of seeking relief. Despite condemnation by the Catholic Church, the movement gained strength and reached its greatest popularity during the onslaught of the Black Death that ravaged Europe in the mid-14th century. Because the king and the Catholic Church were sworn to protect all Jews and lepers, the Jews were often known as the king's property. The Black Death caused mass hysteria that led to physical and verbal attacks against the king and the Catholic Church.
In a world seeking to appease God's fury, Christian tolerance crumbled as the community began a murderous purge. Neighbor turned on neighbor, seeking out scapegoats, heretics, outsiders, and the Jews.
There were many changes in the Catholic Church, the biggest being that they gave the power to give last rites over to the people. They had to do this because there were not enough clergy to give last rites, and most were afraid of getting sick.
While the church believed in proper burial after death, however, due to the amount of bodies, they ran out of places to bury all of their dead. As a result, they had to dig mass graves to put all the bodies. Even though many people had died, the church received many donations, which led to their financial prosperity during the plague. Many clergymen died of the plague, so they had to be replaced with less educated, younger clergymen. Due to the less educated clergymen and the new need for clergy, Latin was no longer the language for Mass. Instead, the language was changed to the local language. Lastly, there were less churches in Europe because of all the death within the church. Therefore, Mass became accessible to all people.
The church collected indulgences as dues for sins that Luther believed were already forgiven. This was the spark that led to the Protestant Reformation.
Martin Luther posted the 95 Thesis on the church door. This thesis included his thoughts of the church and how the church should be operated. Through his 95 Thesis, he basically presented a new way of living. Ideals like these led to people leaving the Catholic Church and later leading to the Protestant. Families began to leave each other and go other places, which helped spread the plague. Neighbors also abandoned each other, and this led to the breakdown of communities. People started to care less about community conditions. They left bodies out in the street to rot. Towns were depopulated and order broke down, leaving no law enforcement. Many people saw this as a time to sin and do as they pleased, meaning they got trashed and broke their morals. This stemmed from people being sick or dying, and also many people left urban areas. Also, because everyone was sick, there was no one to buy any goods that were being produced, meaning that lords and the elite were greatly impacted. Before the plague, there were an increase in population in Europe, causing worse conditions. However, after the plague, there was an increased standard of living.
Many peasants banded together and tried to take over the church, because after all the death, the hierarchy became very unstable. So, groups of peasants came together and formed their own ideas. However, the church got rid of them. This led to a loss in popularity in the Catholic Church. People began to think a little too much and not only persecuted the Jews, but also brought in the idea of superstition into their lives. Superstition became a major problem, and from this stemmed witchcraft. During the Black Death, witch hunting became an obsession. The Catholic Church was directly affected in many ways because of the Black Death. In the end, the church lost power, lost people, and earned a great deal of mistrust from the people. However, it was positively affected because some gave money to the church in hopes of stopping the plague. Lastly, because of the different ideas that emerged through the people like Martin Luther, more denominations began to form, and that's how the Black Plague changed the Catholic Church.